The Lord be with you.
And with your spirit.
A reading from the Holy Gospel according to Mark.
Glory to you, Lord.
When Jesus had crossed again in the boat to the other side, a large crowd gathered around him, and he stayed close to the sea. One of the synagogue officials named Jairus came forward. Seeing him, he fell at his feet and pleaded earnestly with him, saying, "My daughter is at the point of death. Please come, lay your hands on her, that she may get well and live." He went off with him, and a large crowd followed him and pressed upon him. There was a woman afflicted with hemorrhages for 12 years. She had suffered greatly at the hands of many doctors and had spent all she had. Yet she was not helped by any, but only grew worse. She had heard about Jesus and came up behind him in the crowd and touched his cloak. She said, "If I but touch his clothes, I shall be cured." Immediately her flow of blood dried up. She felt in her body that she was healed of her affliction. Jesus, aware at once that power had gone out from him, turned around in the crowd and asked, "Who has touched my clothes?" But his disciples said to Jesus, "You see how the crowd is pressing upon you, and yet you ask, 'Who touched me?'" And he looked around to see who had done it. The woman, realizing what had happened to her, approached in fear and trembling. She fell down before Jesus and told him the whole truth. He said to her, "Daughter, your faith has saved you. Go in peace and be cured of your affliction." While he was still speaking, people from the synagogue official's house arrived and said, "Your daughter has died. Why trouble the teacher any longer?" Disregarding the message that was reported, Jesus said to the synagogue official, "Do not be afraid, just have faith." He did not allow anyone to accompany him inside except Peter, James, and John, the brother of James. When they arrived at the house of the synagogue official, he caught sight of a commotion, people weeping and wailing loudly. So he went in and said to them, "Why this commotion and weeping? The child is not dead, but asleep." And they ridiculed him. Then he put them all out. He took along the child's father and mother and those who were with him, and he entered the room where the child was. He took the child by the hand and said to her, "Talitha koum," which means, "Little girl, I say to you, arise." The girl, a child of 12, arose immediately and walked around. At that they were utterly astounded. He gave strict orders that no one should know this, and said that she should be given something to eat. The Gospel of the Lord.
Praise to you, Lord Jesus Christ.
I grew up in a small town about an hour from here called Augusta, Kentucky. And Augusta is known for a number of things, but it's home to several famous and beautiful people. I mean, you have me, of course, but obviously, right? But we also have Miss America 2000, Heather Renee French Henry, but it's also the home of the Clooney family, as in George Clooney, as in like ER George Clooney. So when ER came out in the 1990s, everyone in Augusta watched ER. Everyone. And that's all people talk about for years. I mean, ER was on for like 12-something years. But it grew old sort of quick. But as I watched that show growing up, I realized that all of these medical dramas all have something in common. They all start out at the beginning of the show, and it's all nice and calm, and the ER's quiet. And then all of a sudden disaster strikes, right? Some trauma. Someone comes in, they have this life-afflicting condition that's never been seen before. Never. And then something happens and there's a miracle and that person is saved. You know? So often George Clooney, aka Dr. Ross, saves the day. So medical dramas always have this concept, life or death. Always placing before us some traumatic event that's going to scare us. And it's only one hope. There's only one thing that you can do to save this person. Or one never thought of medical procedure that can make this person whole. Or, the power goes out next door holding someone's heart. But of course they pull through. Because of the TV show. They're looking for a miracle that stands between someone's survival and death. Seldom do we consider that God is part of those moments. Not the TV show. He might be there. But in those moments of medical, that decision between life and death. Now don't get me wrong, I like doctors. I have a lot of doctor friends. But we have to make sure that God is in those moments. Because humans really aren't in control, are we? It's God. The question isn't if God wants us to live, but whether we trust Him and His plan. The psalm that we sang this afternoon doesn't just praise God for what He does, but for who God is to us. He's the one who preserves us and rescues us. Because God is the God of all life. In our first reading we heard God formed us to be imperishable. That means that we won't die. God intends for our immortal souls to live on forever. Whatever happens to our mortal bodies is in God's hands, in God's time. However, the way that we live our lives here and now can have eternal, lasting consequences. The Book of Wisdom, our first reading, is always presenting us with that same medical drama. Life or death. But this time it's eternal life or everlasting death. We know that Christ became poor. That is, that He came down to earth through the incarnation. He was born at Christmas. So that you and I might become rich. That is, that we might be imperishable. That our souls will live on forever. They will live on in heaven, in communion with our God. Now, our gospel takes this story a step farther in showing us that God is the great lover of life. We could focus solely on the girl who was dying, who was dead, a 12-year-old girl. But there's a story put in the middle there. The woman who was hemorrhaging, the woman who was bleeding. The fact that she was bleeding made her unclean. Just like someone who would have leprosy. They would be ostracized from society. So not only do we have this woman who is dying because she is bleeding to death, but she's also socially dead. She's been cast out from society. So when Jesus heals her, when He feels power go out from her, He says, "You are forgiven. You are healed. Go." He not only restores her physical health, but more importantly, Jesus reconciles her. He brings her back into communion with God, but with also society. Brings her back into the fold of the human family. Jesus works to overcome the stigmas of that day. Today, in 2018, many people are still cast off. They're not in communion with someone or something. They're not in communion with their families, perhaps. Or they're not in communion with their friends or the church. We live in a divided world, don't we? We live in a world that is polarized. For some reason, it's easier to cast someone off. It's easier for us to unfriend someone, to disown them because of something. Maybe perhaps something that they are, or something that they believe. And we can all think of someone that has been cast off from some group. Maybe because of their political affiliation, or their favorite politician, or their preferred news source, or their immigration status, or their financial prowess. Maybe they are addicted or disabled. Maybe we cast them off because of their religion, or lack of religion, or their marital status, or their sexual orientation. We don't have to agree on everything, but we're still called to be united together. Perhaps people have been cast off, like the woman in the gospel, by us. Or perhaps we find ourselves being the one who is cast off, removed from the group. Our readings this afternoon show us that God formed all of us, you and me, all people, no distinction, to live with Him forever in this life and in the next. He loves us so much so that He sent His only Son, born of a virgin, to be crucified for us. Not some of us, but for all of us. He did so to make us rich. He became poor so that we could have eternal life. The Eucharist that we receive this afternoon is the Eucharist of reconciliation, reconciling you and I with our loving God, the God of all life, the God who wants us to choose from that medical drama, eternal death or eternal life. But the Eucharist that we celebrate today also reconciles and unites us together as members of the body of Christ to form communion that overcomes divisions. It strengthens us to overcome whatever separates us. So ask yourself this afternoon, as you leave here this afternoon, where in your life do you need to reconcile with others? Who do you need to reach out to this week to reconcile with? Who's been cast on, left dead, to wither on the vine? You know, it's easy for us to pray for someone who's sick or in the hospital, pray for their physical healing. And that's a good and worthy thing for us to do as Christians. But do we care enough about the other person to put our faith into action, to act on our prayers, to reach out and invite those who have been cast off back into the fold? Think about that this week. Let that be our prayer that comes to fruition.